to the double shot with Nightmare and Slingshot. That's also known as James and Alex Fitzgerald. But we go by our Top Gun code names these days. So please, if you write us a letter, don't call us anything else. It's Nightmare and it's Slingshot. James is Nightmare. I'm Slingshot.
Had a great weekend, cousin. I hope you did too. Getting close
Weekend
to
is
wedding
long
time
gone,
now. You are looking shredded in the lead up to the wedding. What must be a couple of months away now. Pretty exciting.
Thank you. Am I cold and wearing a hoodie, or am I just trying to sweat out all the shred? I don't know.
The aircon's actually on 35 degrees in your office right now.
Well, actually, that would be the go if I had any control over that thermometer. Is it a thermometer?
I don't know. We'll just call it the aircon.
The little knob thing. Somebody did tell me at the gym this morning that, or made a joke about putting a plastic bag on whilst doing cardio, and I just thought it was something quite interesting that I'd never heard of before.
Sweating.
Fitzgerald. So I'll be schwitzing all over the place. But yes, the wedge shred. We're 2 months out today, cars, and it's getting a little bit more real. It's getting a little bit more real.
Hey,
I would like to introduce
tell you what
a new
is real.
segment.
So I was just going to say, I'll tell you what's real. The absolute pandemonium that is going down at airports around Australia at the moment and has been for the last couple of months. It's everywhere in the newspapers. I got a dose of it firsthand on the weekend. I was going down to Sydney to see my sister Bridget down there. Was due to fly out Saturday morning, 7:30.
Oh, no.
Get to the airport at 6:30 and at 7 o'clock the flight gets cancelled.
Yeah.
I said, "Whoa, you're joking." So I went to the Virgin desk and said, what's my new flight? And they said, you're going via Melbourne, but we're going to get you there.
From Brisbane.
From Brisbane. And they were proposing
you're going
to put me
via
on
the
a
Cook Islands, but we'll get you there.
proposing to put me on at 10 a.m., land in Melbourne at 1 o'clock, and then fly out at 7 p.m. that night to get to Sydney at 8:30. I was due to fly back at 8 a.m. the next morning. I said, no, thank you. And seemingly a lot of people in that boat, there's just no backup staff. So if they have a sick staff member, they're just not able to cover them today.
It is school holidays. It's school holidays for Vic in New South Wales, cuz. So bit of a numbnuts time to travel to Sydney of all places. But look, first world problems. You got to admit, when your flight gets cancelled, for me, I always just keep into perspective. First world problems, and these things happen.
And the airport was chockers. Tell you what, people are absolutely back into the swing of travel today.
Good for them. Good for them. Maybe not the sick flight attendants and the crew, but in any event.
Hey, we love a prank here, and you've stumbled across one of the great pranks, haven't you?
No,
in fact, I'm going to say it's great and weird as a prank goes.
It's so odd. It is the weirdest thing I've ever heard, and it was in the Financial Review, so I found that quite funny as well on Sunday night, just gone a couple of days ago. So get this, because I don't know if you read it, but J.K. Rowling, one of the greatest authors of all time, obviously wrote Harry Potter. I say obviously because, damn, if you don't know that. What are you laughing at?
Can you Producer Nick's put the Hogwarts music on in the background.
How does he know our bloody schedule? Yeah, I love that. Hogwarts. I can't hear it. But anyway, she was pranked. J.K. Rowling thought, I'm spitting everywhere today. You can see it, sorry. She thought she was jumping onto a Zoom call with Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, to have a chat about her kids charity where she's helping kids get out of Ukraine, protect them from all the war going on there and the Russian invasion. She was having a high-level discussion about amazing things, and it was a bit awkward, this transcript. She's left to find out she was never talking to Zelensky, and she was talking to these notorious Russian pranksters who are in full support of Putin.
Oh, dear.
Is that the weirdest thing ever? And they was making all these weird suggestions you should change Harry Potter's scar to just the Ukrainian it was really weird. How bizarre is that though?
It is amazing that she doesn't have people that figure that out, that it's a prank for her.
These guys are high-level pranksters, wow. Internet pranksters. So, they've got their ways, and apparently they've pulled off many a prank over the years. So they're quite well known. I didn't write down their name, sorry. But once they exposed themselves, it was people going, okay, those guys. Bit embarrassing for J.K. Rowling.
Now, we've lost the stat fact, but I'm going to bring it back this week. It's not on the run sheet, but I got one for you.
We haven't lost it. We haven't lost it. We got to keep it fresh. We got to keep it fresh.
So, stat fact. The stat man.
Stat fact.
Did you know that for the first time ever, the Indian or first-born population of Australia that have come from India is in the top 5 as per census data released later today. It got leaked. The Indian-Australian population weren't even in the top 5 for the past 4 censuses. They have rocketed into number 3 behind, obviously, Australian born, and then UK still the second highest alternative to being born inside of Australia. India, number 3, China, number 4, New Zealand, number 5. But India wasn't even in the top 5 years ago, now in the top 5.
Amazing. Oh, so you to just leak ABS data in your stat fact. Get a life.
By the way, little teaser for next week. The ABS data from the census last year is coming out later this afternoon as we record. So we've got Statman Sam on the case. We're going to be covering a lot of that next week, so tune in.
Well, I want to introduce a new segment, which I started to say at the start, and sorry to say, you cut me off to tell you about your first world problems, but that's okay. I want to introduce a new segment, which could have been a fun fact, but I want to introduce a segment called What Did You Google This Week?
So, click Google. Instead of make stupid questions, click Google.
What was that?
Worse. Honestly.
Come on, Nika.
I just think producer Nick gets a little bit trigger. I think he just gets a bit trigger happy.
Google it!
I think his son, little William, wakes him up at 2 a.m. sometimes and he just looks for random bits on the internet. What did you Google this week? Well, this week, I'll start with myself and then we'll move on from here. I Googled, because I genuinely wanted to know, how many emails are sent per year worldwide? And obviously, this is where do we even start when you're trying to estimate this? I'm not going to turn it into a pop quiz because we got way too much to cover today because you've gone rogue. But it's somewhere in the vicinity of 320 billion.
320 billion emails.
Yep.
That is incredible.
Per annum. That's right. Up from, in 2019, 306 billion. So you can see how we sent quite a lot more billions in emails over the lockdown period. So what did you Google this week? Well, that's what I Googled, and that was for no reason, by the way. I was just driving, and I was like, I just wonder.
Nice one. Nice one. I've never had the thought of wanting to know how many people send emails each year.
I only thought about it this week, and I guess, you can put things down to having a podcast and bringing in some really wonderful, wonderful, well-thought-out content.
So that's going to be a rolling segment. I look forward to that. I thought where we go next is a really interesting perspective on inflation.
Whoa, straight off the bat. Okay, let's go into it.
Straight off the bat. A gentleman who I do not know the name of, I didn't jot down his name, but he used to be in the Treasury Department of the government, so he's an economist of sorts.
Big wig. Yep.
And what he's come out and said is wages aren't going backwards. In fact, wages are rising faster than inflation.
Amazing.
Which is the exact opposite of pretty much every newspaper headline and topic of conversation in a social setting for the past 6 months. Listen to it, though, because there is a little bit of common sense to it, and it did make me think.
Okay.
So first of all, he says when it comes to wages, what we're not measuring when it comes to wage growth is the fact that the super contributions are going up each year. So you used to get 10%. I think it's now 11. It's going to be 12% shortly. So we're getting paid more super that doesn't come into our bank accounts but is improving our financial position. He then goes on to say that bonuses aren't recorded and nor are promotions. So we don't record what a specific individual gets paid. We simply record the wages of the average of the population. So he says we're not tracking that people get promoted over time. And then he goes on to say, most importantly, from an inflation perspective, the cost of buying a house and building a house is factored into inflation. and it's slightly more than 10% weighting, which he goes on to say typically isn't a consumption. It's an investment of sorts. It's not something you consume day in, day out, week in, week out. So he sort of has a point. It's not economically correct, but he did have a point that made me think, geez, maybe it's being beat up for more than what it is.
Well, I haven't necessarily read that wages have gone backwards, just that they haven't really had any growth, but amongst us having a lot of cost growth, So in that context, they've sort of stagnated, and in effect, we've gone backwards. But very interesting perspective, and I like just having a different perspective, right?
Yes.
And I guess a segue from that is we're quite a wealthy country. We talk about it a fair bit, but another report was released this week that our household wealth in total has surged 35.5%, and that's since, of course, the beginning of COVID. So there's a bit in there, well, a large chunk of that would be the values of our own homes. But in addition to that, of course, households have accumulated a lot of cash under the mattress, if you will. 305 billion in currency is what we've accumulated and deposits, and that's over the last 2 years. About 200 billion was saved in the 2021 calendar, and so far this year, about 25 billion. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, and we're cashed up. That's for sure. $300 billion, 25. What happened in July last year when we put $25 billion of extra savings into our bank account? Were we locked down? We must have been. Because the data specifically points to...
Yes, we were. Melbourne was in July.
In July, 25 billion.
But, that's just us. So.
All right. I want to say that you were my inspiration on my morning run this morning. You put some data in the podcast prep sheet on Monday, which I read before I woke up this morning and thought, you know what, I'm going to look out for it. I counted the houses that are for sale in my street, in the area where I'd go for a run, and I looked at how many were going to auction. Only 1 out of 7. Whereas I reckon this time last year there was at least half going to auction. So number of auctions are down in my street, and it seems across Australia.
Because I just thought, when you started the segment saying that I was your inspiration, I got really excited. And where you went, it's not that inspiring. Anyway.
Emotional damage.
Oh my God, I used to say that all the time. Close to 30% of homes listed for auction in Sydney, most expensive city in Australia. We all know that. It's not new news. They were withdrawn. And it's not because people were selling before auction. It was because sellers are a little bit nervous at the moment. Maybe real estate agents are also a little bit nervous. I mean, you've got the lowest unemployment ever. You've got not a lot of migration. So maybe we're just at capacity of where we can get to with just your good old-fashioned Aussies and residents. But basically, Sydney is transitioning into more of a private selling market than an auction market. By comparison, this time last year, they were hitting about 77% auction clearance rates. Last weekend, they did 55, but they did take a lot off the table. Melbourne, we actually had a pretty good weekend. 61% is what we did compared to 74% last year. And then Brisbane, where I somehow inspired you on your run, they're actually up. So
yeah.
It's not saying much for your street, but 65% auction clearance rates in Brisbane compared to 59% same time last year. Brisbane, not classically an auction city, so maybe you've just transitioned into a bit more of an auction-savvy city.
There's still lots of for sale signs up, so people are selling and clearly buying.
Course.
There was a lot of sold stickers floating around as well. But yeah, Sydney, Melbourne, a little bit more balanced market is what I'm taking out of that today. A few more people maybe opting for the private treaty where you can let people put things subject to finance and a bit more flexible buying terms.
A buying advocate's best time in the market. A little bit of private auction, a little bit of Lux listings, a bit of Simon Cohen.
Good for them. Hey, you talk about agents and vendors being nervous.
Good for them.
Employers are nervous. There's 400,000 job vacancies in Australia today. We mentioned that last week. Not quite as many as the 13-odd million floating around in America at the moment. But employers struggling to find people, Virgin Australia being one of them. So let me ask you, why don't we have enough workers to fill the jobs?
Well, I mean, put down to it, we just don't have enough people here.
Enough people.
We don't have enough people here. We've got to open up send in the
Simple
floodgates, send in the people. We just don't have enough working population. You know, we just do not. But interestingly, most businesses that are looking for staff at the moment, their biggest struggle is actually lack of applicants. So they're just 80% of them are saying, we're just not even getting people applying. It's a bit grim. It's a bit grim. And a far cry from, 18 months ago when everyone was applying but still getting their JobKeeper, job seeker payments, but all they had to do was apply. And then about 59, nearly 60% said they're struggling with the required skill set. And sorry, but this is a funny story I have to share. I was in Adelaide last week and I met with a couple of my developers, and their engineers and their civil contracting companies are seriously understaffed and have no skilled applicants. And they said in the month of June, they had 14 people apply that had no engineering background for engineering jobs. And I was like, you know what? Shoot for the stars. You know what? Shoot for the stars. Probably one of the few jobs. Well, no, sorry, not. There's many jobs that you just could not do without some kind of trained degree engineering.
Maybe they accidentally just put at the bottom, that standard line of applicants with a degree will be preferred. So it was an option.
Anyway, we're knocking on the door of sort of nearly 54% of people just saying we just cannot find anybody. There's no applications.
And for context, that's up from 10 to 12% pre-pandemic. It pretty much floated between 10 and 20% for a decade prior to the pandemic itself. So to be at 50% is huge. A lot of people struggling.
Well, it looks like since 1990 we've never even gone over 25% of businesses struggling to look for skilled staff. So really interesting times, but let's move on. Where are we going now?
Well, another guy who's nervous is the mayor of a South Coast, what do they call it? A South Coast regional town.
We need to go hand out tranquilizers.
Coastal New South Wales Council, they are begging 7,500 holiday homeowners from Canberra and Sydney to make their properties available for rent temporarily to help the region's housing crisis. Unbelievable.
This is a really interesting crisis that we're seeing everywhere. I think they're seeing it in Sydney as well and a lot of regional towns. And I've heard it be called the MOMA effect, which was what happened in Tasmania. When MOMA opened, the Museum of Modern Art, a lot of regular rentals long-term became Airbnbs. And then, of course, that butts out all of the, availability for private rental properties for staff and anyone who's living there full-time. And that seems to have happened in a lot of places. The council mayor, Matthew Hatcher, he's written to these non-residents and said, please, I'm begging you, take them off Airbnb where you'll probably make more money and put them on the long-term market, and let's solve the rental affordability and availability crisis that we've got down here, which is interesting because they've gone as far to say that about 4,000 of those homes are owned by Sydney residents, so people who actually live in Sydney, and they've just got that as a bit of a holiday home, not necessarily a full-time Airbnb. 3,500 owned by Canberrians, and then a really small amount owned by Victorians. So kind of people sort of second home, and they might just Airbnb it 3 or 4 months of the year to sort of make a bit of cash flow when they're not there. So they're not necessarily income producing assets per se, but we're seeing this in a lot of those regional towns.
Well, I did make a head start on next week's run sheet for the census data, and one of the facts that caught my eye was the fact that there is 11 million dwellings in Australia, and when we did the census last year, 1 million of those dwellings were not rented or occupied.
Whoa. That's a lot.
That is a lot. I don't know whether it's holiday homes. I'd have to, as I said, I've just gone off what's available at the moment. I will drill into that and come back on next week's pod, break it down a bit.
There is absolutely no doubt about it.
And I will tell Eurobadalla Shire Council Mayor Matthew Hatcher about that. He's the mayor who has issued a call to arms asking those Canberrans and Sydney-siders to make their homes available.
Please open the floodgates. Where are they going to put all of their furniture? Anyway, a guy, let's traverse to a guy who is probably got a bit of self-interest.
He's probably got a few homes sitting vacant around Australia.
Bit of self-interest, but respectfully, I will say that Triguboff, Harry Triguboff, the 89-year-old multi-billionaire, property developer, the Oracle, we absolutely love him. He's going hard, but he's also trying to deliver, nearly record-breaking amounts of apartments, not only to sort of gear up his group Marathon, but also to, of course, as he says, solve this availability and affordability market for renters and perhaps even owners. I've got a question for you, a little pop quiz, because you always complain I don't pop quiz you enough. It's so clear in this episode who's the nerd and who is the disorganized freak show. Hey. Harry Triguboff, how many dwellings do you reckon he has delivered? Do you reckon? Very Aussie. Dan the Milkshake Man would not like that.
Well, I know he's got more than 2,000 that he owns and rents out.
Yeah, so but delivered.
He'd have to be – he's done the majority of it in the last decade, so I'm going to say just under 10,000.
Now I'm questioning the data that I have read.
Oh, no. The one bit of prep you did and you're questioning it. What's your answer?
6,800.
Maybe.
That can't be right, though.
It sounds a little bit light. That might be old data. I know he's. We'll go back
Put it as a discussionary point more than a pop quiz. Then
we'll ring him later this week and we'll try and ask, shall we?
Anyway, I've tokened a new phrase: "Go Triguboff or go home," because at 89 years of age, he is going gangbusters, developing more apartments than he's ever done before, despite somewhere in the vicinity of 1,000, despite rising costs. Construction, everything. He's just a legend. He said, building costs are surging and supply is tightening. There are less and less units being built, and this is a consistent drop. But when we sell apartments, the price is fixed and it can't be lifted because of industry problems with cost and supply. The man has just backed himself, and I got to say, in more ways than one, he has delivered.
I was just going to say, the big project or the big bet he is making is in Macquarie Park, which is roughly 15 k's northwest of the Sydney CBD. It's a pretty big employment area. A lot of people have their offices, a lot of companies with their offices out in Macquarie Park. He's got a 2-hectare site, which is 20,000 square metres. 1 hectare is 10,000 square metres.
Huge.
He bought it from Goodman Group. It was an old industrial site, and he's building 1,000 units across 3 towers. And he is aiming to keep at least one of the towers himself to rent out. So that is his commitment and conviction in what he's calling a massive undersupply of housing in Australia today, which he's right about. Vacancy rates at an all-time high. So you got to probably look at what the Oracle's doing and say, if he's doing it, it's probably good enough for the rest of us. Except
I just think he's unreal.
1,000.
Because he go Triguboff or go home. He's 89 years of age and he's doing some of his biggest developments. What a legend.
All right, been a big show. That'll wrap it up, I reckon. If you've got some questions, send them in.
You were going to
send them in. We'll allow you to get back to the sauna, continue the wedge shred.
The sauna. Have we missed anything? Sure we don't have anything else? No,
we're all good. Thank you for listening, guys. Have a great week.
Guys, sorry in advance. Nightmare's going to come to the next pod with a lot of ABS data and statistics. And you know what? It is the data that tells us a lot about our country. So, look, I do love it as well, but bring it on.
Guys, put it in your calendar. You're not going to want to miss it. It will be riveting. All right. See you guys. Have a good week.
Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Double Shot with your favourite cousins, Alex and James Fitzgerald. If you've got a burning question or something we absolutely need to talk about on the pod, please write to us. Both of our emails are in the show notes. For little real estate tidbits and a little bit of banter, okay, a lot of banter, you can follow us on the gram. Our handle is thedoubleshot.podcast. That, my friends, is thedoubleshot.podcast. Until next time, think of us when you sit back and sip your next double shot.